Least favorite?
The least favorite is actually, I mean, whenever you run, I mean, the size of my group is fluctuated over time. It's been, at least in to me, it's been relative, a very large size. It's been 20 individuals that were working in the lab. In other cases, it's been much smaller. So it fluctuates from time to time, depending on the resources that I have. And when you, and this is true not just at science and labs or any place, I think when you have that many individuals in a location, it's quite common that you have interpersonal issues that you have to, so those would be probably the least favorite, that you're trying to solve interpersonal issues, which are perhaps even more complicated than the science. But I have come up with a solution to this. Actually, so I'll ask you, what do you think is a good solution to this? And then I'll tell you my answer. It's probably a good thing to be telling people right now, because a lot of you are going to be in this situation, and it's an important, and it's one that where you'll have multiple people working for you. I mean, Chris, in the future, I can imagine you'll be doing something where you'll have probably 5 to 10 people who are reporting to you, and you may have to deal with this on a regular basis.
I'm not sure. Maybe getting a professional. I know there's like industrial organizational like psychologists. There's like lab rules, setting like very like clear boundaries. But yeah.
No, so actually, you clearly are much more of a natural at this than I am. It took me much longer to figure what you just said out. And basically, what I do now is, if I find I'm being challenged with one of these things, is I'll go to our human resources department. And that's exactly what you said. These individuals have dealt with these problems for years, and they know exactly what needs to be done, and they know what exactly needs to be done that's the best for the lab and also the best for the institute. So it's a very common issue that many of us have to address, and I say exactly what you just mentioned. Go to the people who know how to deal with these and have trained their entire life to do it. So great answer.
Thank you. And I think this also, like, this concept of like scientists are also human beings. Like, we're not like, and people aren't just like these robots. And when you touch about creativity too, I feel like some of my favorite scientists are like Feynman or like Einstein, like very creative, like known to be very creative individuals. And I think, where does like really in your life, do you think like the lab coat ends and like your personal life begins? Is it like, are there boundaries like work versus like personal life, or is it more kind of a blend?
So in the past, I definitely, it's safe to say I definitely had issues with spending too much time focusing on work. So that has certainly been something that I've, at least in the past, has been challenging. However, now I think I just have lots of different outlets especially now that I'm in the latter part of my career. It's become easier to do both science, and I'm actually involved in many different things. Actually, that was the last part of what I had put together in this. I'll actually, yeah, this is an enjoyable question. So now I'm doing all sorts of different things. You can see my bikes in the background here. In this particular case, I'm building a ladder, which, I mean, who thought that you could build ladders in this? You watch a YouTube video and you find out that building a ladder is incredibly easy. So it really only took a day to actually put this together. And this is everything I'm showing you. I've done this in the last 6 months or so.
Oh, wow.
This is a bamboo fence that I built
Oh,
for
wow.
our yard. And this is a little table I just built, and this is a fountain that I just built for the deck. And this is a patio I just made out of railroad ties. And actually, this is a couple of weeks ago I made this desk for myself because I created a clone workstation at home.
Oh, wow.
And this I just took this morning, a picture of this morning. This is a table I made for
It's
Mary's.
beautiful.
Yeah, so yeah, I'm involved in. I don't know. It just depends on your personal interest. But I swim, I bike, I do a wide variety of things, and it just I find my balance is actually pretty good at this point. So if you're actually you're talking. I understand that the people I'm talking to right now are not 59 years old. They're
Yes.
16 to 20 years old, as you mentioned to me prior
Yes.
to this. And that, yeah, I think if actually this goes back to the a question you asked about and then maybe you haven't even asked this yet, but you mentioned that you might ask this question about regrets.
Yeah.
And do I have any regrets about and to be quite honest, I've been thinking about this, and I regrets would typically imply that you're not in the place that you want to be right now, because if you change things in the past, you'd ultimately be in a different place in the future. So I'm very happy where I am right now. So with respect to regrets, I was really quite challenged by coming up with something that because I could say that I wish I'd gone to better schools, because I think it would have impacted me in a different way and challenged me more. But in reality, it's ultimately got me to where I am. So I'm glad for that. But now that I think about it again in the context of what we've been discussing, I would say that a regret is that I didn't keep a better balance throughout the first, say, 20 years when I started professionally, because it was perhaps a little bit too work oriented, and I think I missed out on a lot of things that would have been a lot more fun.
Yeah. And I think that's a really hard thing for high schoolers, or even I know this is actually a podcast episode I'm planning to do, because I just think this is an interesting subject, about the rise of quote unquote hustle culture, or just this 24/7 work, study culture that I think there's this huge both sides to the argument, which I really see. And I think although our audience is younger people, I think from people like you who have this experience, I think it's also really reassuring to know that when you talk about regrets, even though there are mistakes that obviously may have been made, in the end, it got you where you are now. I think that's something that's really hard to accept, or hard to envision for a lot of people. So I think that's amazing.
But there's an interesting part of what you're just saying, and that is that, I mean, I've been, and actually this is worth mentioning. So I brought up statins. I brought up and a couple of years ago, I guess it was about 4 or 5 years ago, I was at a conference and I was getting ready to give a presentation.
Yeah.
And I was just working on my computer in bed, and my heart rate started slowing down. So it initially, my heart rate was in the 40s, which was pretty typical for me. It is something that given the amount of activity I do, I have a relatively low heart rate. But then it started going down. It was into high 30s.
Oh, wow.
And over the course of about 3 hours, because I was monitoring this, my presentation wasn't until about 1 o'clock in the afternoon, so I was monitoring it as I was working. So it was in the high 30s, then it went into the mid 30s, and then it went down to the low 30s. And then as I was walking to the to give my presentation, to tell them that I wasn't going to give it because I clearly something was up, I had monitored it and it was at 27. So what?
Like beyond hospitalization.
Well, so I was really having trouble walking, and there's a reason why I'm telling you this, because the reason is that ultimately I was very lucky. I mean, they ended up putting stents in my heart, and I actually and I function absolutely perfectly now. I don't really have any problems whatsoever. But I mean, we were talking about where I am right now, and I'm very happy. For many of us, you're not going to have the opportunity to continue on indefinitely because something may happen. So basically, I would not, those first 20 years where I was just consumed with doing things that I perceived as being important and improving my career situation. I mean, if things would have ended then for me, like there was a good chance they could have ended, I would have, my whole life would have probably been largely based on work, which again, you really brought up this thought of regret to me in that context, which I hadn't anticipated going into today. I had not anticipated even telling you that story, but it was, but we're how many years we actually have is not a given. So that balance is perhaps a little bit, it makes it a little bit more important to be aware of it.
And